Hey, are you having trouble finding the content for your podcast? Well, let me tell you a few tips about what you can do to find the perfect content for your first 10 to 20 episodes. Hello. I cannot wait for today to start. I am so super excited about today. I hope you are as well. Okay, so let me give you some amazing stats. There are 2.5 million podcasts on Apple. Only 450,000 stay active, which means it's so important to stay consistent. Your consistency will be different for everybody, which is fine as long as you're consistent. There are different types of podcasts, and we'll go over those too, but those people are looking to learn something new. You can do one time a month. If you want to do it twice a month, you can do it twice a month. Yeah, absolutely. Whatever your consistency is, if you want to throw in a bonus episode, or if you decide after you've done, my advice for this is always just tell your listener, tell them what you're planning on to. If you have a course and it is just basically you talking to the screen like this would actually make an excellent podcast because you can do a podcast about anything. You can do a podcast about your product, your class, your coaching. You can just give information. You can do a podcast about your passion. I really want you to think about 10 different topics that you can actually talk about in your niche of your podcast. All things money, strategy, and energetics. Love it. Jeannie says, yes, all about business, all types of marketing, growth, video, social. I want to talk about all things food, wine, hospitality. See? So that I don't know if this person's passion, but it doesn't matter because that's an awesome topic, right? So let's see. You already have all 10 of your topics written down. Those are 10 episodes right there. I serve on several nonprofits, and it's a dream to be able to use podcasts to help explain why we do. Oh, that is awesome. I love that one too. These are all great topics. Great stuff. So, how to become authentic alignment with self. I love it. These are awesome topics, guys. Awesome. I cannot wait to listen to everybody's podcast. Do some river writing or record it in your phone. Start with an idea and just keep writing for a minute and just see how much information you can write down in a minute. And I was actually reminded of this technique last week when I was doing a podcast interview for someone else who I think is going to be launching this week. You can actually come up with so many different topics, so many different ideas. And then just because you come up with 10, a lot of times you can look at those and you can actually break them down even tighter to different ones. You want to just write all of those down because that is going to be super important to making sure that you kickstart this launch right off. Let me tell you a little bit about show structure in the generalized form here. Okay. So there is the solo episode. And a solo episode, I'm going to say between 20 and 40 minutes. So if you're doing 30, you're average. That's good. An interview style podcast, which is you asking questions to someone else, maybe through Zoom, Zencaster, Riverside, right? That is going to be, or you could actually do that live in your group like this, download it and use it as your podcast. You could do that too. But ultimately, an interview is probably about 30 to 45 minutes. There's a good baseline for interview. Make sure your microphones are set up differently and things like that. You need to know the 3 to 5 keywords of your niche, your business, to make sure that you are ranking for those when people search for them. That's how that works. You do a podcast on chicken coops, and you have in your name chicken coop, and in your description chicken coop, and maybe in a couple of titles chicken coop. You are going to rank higher and higher and higher in Google. Does that make sense? Hopefully. It came up as soon as I started Chicken Coop Pod. Perfect. See, they did the SEO right. That's exactly right. So, okay, so if I have a Chicken Coop podcast and I'm typing in Chicken Coop podcast, but I really just want to know about roosters, Chicken Coop podcast may not ever pop up, right? Even though you may have multiple episodes about roosters. they may not connect with your podcast. Now, a lot of people may say to themselves, I really want to do a podcast on crystals, right? Different types of crystals. But then their podcast, so they name their podcast something like Crystals Are Us, and then they start talking about incense in there. If they don't have an episode title with the word incense in it, they may not rank for that. So you always want to keep in mind the things that you're talking about in order to do that. So for the crystal podcast, if you wanted to talk about the different types of crystals, Amazonite, or you wanted to talk about lapis lazuli, or you wanted to talk about amethyst crystal, lapis lazuli crystal, Amazonite crystal. You're adding that in, and that is going to reinforce the name of the podcast. That is going to reinforce Google to come back and find your podcast episode. Now, when you go to name your podcast, it is kind of redundant to use the word podcast in your name. It's already a podcast. It's going to be listed as a podcast. So you don't necessarily need to do it like having an ATM card, automated teller machine at the machine. Oh, okay. So that the X-Files podcast, right? Well, this first of all, X-Files is probably copyrighted, so probably don't use that one, right? But you could probably use something along the lines of the XYZ podcast, although then that just is, or the XYZ files. There we go. And then what you're going to do is you're going to just give yourself a little bit of leeway there to come up with the name, come up with your niche, come up with who you're talking to, and just Google it. Just Google it a couple of times, use it on Bing, use it on Yahoo, whatever they've got. Make sure that there's not that exact name. Now, I have had clients and they are insistent that they want to use that exact name, and it has been used before. And you can use it. Do a little bit more research on the name. Now, a lot of podcasts were sent out in 2020 and they're no longer being used. If you remember, I said at the beginning of this, 2.5 million podcasts on Apple, but only 50,000 of them are active. If that podcast is not active and you plan on creating it and making it active on a weekly basis, monthly basis, whatever, then go ahead and use it. You can tweak the name a little bit if you want. Make sure your cover art doesn't look anything like theirs. If it's something that you absolutely love, absolutely, don't give up on it just because somebody else used it in 2020 and hasn't produced another episode. Just take it on as your own. So just do a little bit of research on all three of those platforms is what I would say. Apple, Google, Spotify. Make sure that when you search them, that they're all up there, that it's not up there, and that your name is unique to you, unique with your keywords, and unique for your audience to find you. A website for your podcast, you can actually link to that because it has all the different platforms on that one. So that's a pretty nice one to keep in your repertoire for later if you don't have a website yet. Another one to look up is podnews.net. That's podnews.net. And you can check that area there. And if any of those do have the same podcast name as yours, you can also check a website called Chartable, and that will give you some rankings on that particular podcast. It will give you some rankings on that podcast to see if it's active, if people are still listening to it, if it has been on any of the charts. You can actually have a tagline, right? So you could have your podcast be The Chicken Coop, A Rooster's Story, right? Then you've got both of those in there, right? So you've got the chicken coop and then you've got the rooster in there. So you could do that. What if there's a podcast named Money Talks from The Economist? Will that matter? No, it's a different name. You could do Money Talks as 2-word, but then have like a colon. You could have yours is Money Talks. Are you listening? Big old question mark there. So totally looks different from The Economist, which listen, I would listen to Money Talks. Are you listening? Well before I would listen to Money Talks from The Economist. So you're already a winner in my book, Kristen. I love that. I don't know if you guys have ever seen, but so the name of my business is KP Creative Media, but KP Creative Media on Facebook was taken, not on Instagram, but on Facebook, and not on YouTube, but on Facebook. So on Facebook, my Facebook page name is actually part of my old craft store business name. And then that. So it's kept, KEPT, creative media. So I kind of got it around it that way too. But ultimately, as long as you have that link readily available for people, they're not typing in kept creative media. How often are you going to release that episode? I want to give you guys a couple of options for this. You could do every day. You could do bi-weekly, 2 times a week, right? Again, a lot of work, but people do it. The most common is weekly or every other week. All my clients do weekly. I have a corporate client that doesn't, but that's okay. So all of my small business clients do weekly. And as long as there's consistency there and they have great followings. In my mind, that is like a perfect blend of everything. You get to say what you want to say on your podcast, and maybe you have a 20, 30-minute episode. Now, you can do monthly. I don't think I would suggest doing longer stretches than that. I do have a corporate client that does every other month, and the issue is that you lose the traction of your audience because they wanna listen, they wanna hear your voice, they wanna know more about you, they wanna know more about your business, they wanna know more about your product, right? And if you're like, "Hey, yeah, but we'll be back in 2 months," they'll be like, "Yeah, in 2 months, I don't know where I'm gonna be." So I would definitely try to get some consistency there and definitely do it much sooner. But as I was writing this, I just really felt like I had to talk to you guys about this because people want to know. I start this podcast and then I'm going to continue this podcast in perpetuity. That's not true at all. You're going to start this podcast. And then what you're going to do is you're maybe going to do 20, 25, maybe 50 episodes, whatever it is, right? Then you're going to take a little hiatus because the brain needs a hiatus. You don't have to know that at all. All you need to know is the first 10 episodes. And then they roll into like the next 10 episodes. And then maybe that rolls into the next 10. And you say, I've done 30. I'm going to take a 2-month break while I try to find some more guests. You could do a whole bunch of episodes on the care of baby chicks. And then you could do the topic on sicknesses in chickens, right? And all season long, you do like 16 episodes on the different sicknesses and how to fix it in chickens. Is there a place to search highly searched words to use in your name? Yes, I would use, I think it's called like keyword search or something. So if anybody else knows, maybe they'll pop it in, but I will definitely do that after. I was going to do every other to start, but thinking to change it weekly. Nice, excellent. What about boxing a bunch and slowly releasing them? Yes, absolutely. That is what we do with the podcast season blueprint. You record a whole bunch of them, you box them all up, and then you just release them once a week, once every other week. The last little bit for your homework is your show description. Here's where you're going to also use those 3 to 5 keywords that you've looked up. This podcast is going to dive deep into the lives of chickens and their chicken coop. And we are going to be discussing all things chicken health, keyword, all things roosters, keyword, and all things baby chicks, keyword. So I didn't do any keyword stuffing, but I did get that into that first sentence too. So that is how I would think of my show description. Now, show descriptions are different than each episode description. And how Google ranks is that they're going to look 1 at your show title, and then they're going to look 2 at your episode title, and then they're going to look at your show description 3, and then your episode descriptions. Okay, so this is your show title. We talked about that with the 3 to 5 keywords. Your episode titles, because each one of your episodes are going to be different, right? Depending. And then it's also going to be about your show description. I just used all of those different keywords with the chicken coop, the rooster, and the baby chicks, if you remember that. And then your show notes is actually what those are called, episode description. So that's how Google is going to rank those. So keep those in mind as you're coming up with your show title, your podcast name, as you come up with each of the titles of your episodes. You want to always incorporate those keywords somewhere in there. You're probably going to want your show description to be about one long paragraph. So you can split up to two. You don't want it to be too long that it's going to be crazy busy, but you don't want it to be too short where people are like, oh, I have no idea what this is about. And it's so important that you actually add that to your host because that's how people are going to start finding you. Excellent. You are very welcome. You're very, very, very welcome. And I will see you guys. So looking forward to it. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.